Welcome to the video instructions for making Christine's corset cover. This is a pattern by Bella May's Designs, and I'm Bella May, and I'm here to walk you through the step-by-step process. I do want to mention that I had to alter the pattern slightly because I made it too small at first, but I made those adjustments to this pattern so you won't have that piece along the side. So you first need to download and print the pattern. First print page number 1 and make sure that you're printing at the correct scale, which is 100% scale. If that measures correctly, you can go ahead and print the rest of the pages. These blue lines is where you're going to cut in order to assemble the pattern. So cut in the middle of those blue lines, and then you'll assemble the pattern pieces matching up the circles at the corners and the pattern piece lines. After that's done, cut along the solid black lines, and there you have your pattern pieces. Let's take a look at those pattern pieces. We have the front here, and make note that the dart seam allowance is 1/4 inch, whereas the rest of the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. This line here is where I placed my lace insertion on this corset cover. If you want to use that, that's there. And then we have the button placements. Here we have the notches where you'll line up for attaching the front to the back. And then this light gray line here is the waistline. And then for the back piece, again, we have 1/4 inch seam allowance for the darts and 3/8 for the rest. We have the lace insertion placement, notches. This pattern is cut on a fold. Remember that? The grain line runs parallel to that. And then we have the light gray waistline. So first of all, you'll want to decide how you want to place your lace insertion if you want to use it. You can use the gray lines that I have on the pattern, or you can design your own. But once you have it, you will cut along that line that you've designed it, whether that's the gray line on the pattern piece or your own, and then you'll add seam allowance to that cut edge. These are now your modified pattern pieces. That includes that seam allowance that you need to insert that lace insertion. But once you've done that, you can now cut all these pieces out of your fabric. Once all the pieces are cut, you can now insert your lace insertion. You can use your method of choice for this process. I used a different method for this one than my chemise pattern, but really just look into it and see which one you want to use. So the method I use is to first straight stitch the lace insertion to the pattern piece, trim down the seam allowance, and then do a zigzag stitch, which one edge falls on the outer edge of that seam allowance, and the other edge of the zigzag falls into the lace insertion. Once you've got all your lace insertion sewn in place, you'll want to give that a nice pressing, and then you can start assembling the corset cover. So first you'll sew the darts. Remember, these have 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you'll sew the side seams and the shoulder seams. With the shoulder seams, I personally didn't use notches, and I just matched up my lace insertion because that's really important to have that matching. You can now finish these seams with your finishing technique of choice. I personally just did a zigzag stitch to secure those raw ends. Give all these darts and seams a nice pressing, and then we can move on to attaching trim to the neckline. You can use your method of choice for securing this trim and finishing those raw edges. Always give good pressings in between steps to make sure everything is working smoothly. You can also attach lace trim to the armholes of this corset cover. It's really up to you as far as all the decoration stuff goes. Again, you'll want to finish up these raw edges. You can use your method of choice. If your lace trim doesn't go all the way around the armhole, the raw edge of the lower section of the armhole needs to be finished. I recommend using a rolled hem technique. You'll now want to use a rolled hem technique again to finish the bottom edge of the corset cover. You can machine sew this in place or hand sew it. It's really up to you. Now moving on to the front closure. First of all, when you're folding over these seam allowances, instead of having all the bulk right there, you can make an angled corner. angle it over like so, trim away this extra bit, and then fold along the seam allowance line and then along that fold line indicated on the pattern piece. And this distributes all the different layers of the fabric so you don't get one bulky edge to that corner. So again, you're folding the first fold along the seam allowance line, and then you're folding it in again along that line indicated on the pattern piece. This is giving you a nice solid place to place the buttonholes and buttons. So again, you can hand sew this in place, or you can do a top stitch along this folded edge of this area. Once you've got that area finished, you can now mark your placement of your buttons and buttonholes, or you can use something like hooks and eyes. That part is up to you. I do stop my button closure at the waist. The lower section below my waist of this corset cover doesn't have any buttons on it. It just kind of hangs free. I felt like that was okay for me, but you can choose to put another button on the corset cover if you'd like. And then if you want to add a little extra touch to this cover, you can thread a ribbon through your lace trim. That is, if your trim allows for it. And there you have it. Congratulations on making this corset cover. If you have any questions, please email me at bellamaisedesigns@gmail.com, and I would love to see your finished corset cover. You can leave a review on the product listing, or tag me on Instagram at bellamaisedesigns and use the hashtags the Christine Corset cover and Bella Mays Designs patterns.